Hi, everyone. I'll be telling a story to the best of my abilities. It's a bit of a space opera with obvious inspirations, so if you're interested in that kind of thing, then I hope you have a good time. If you're not, I hope you have a good time anyway. I like to bring people back to the good old days where parents would read their kids or tell their kids stories before bed. If not to tell valuable life lessons, then to get them settled down enough before they clocked out for the night. So, without further ado, it's time for a story. So, tuck in and good night. Creation began as a single spark in the darkness. This massive condensed ball of energy and potential scattered dust and debris that would become the foundation of creation itself. This dust swirled and clumped together, and these clumps and swirls would soon become galaxies, which continue to clump and swirl within themselves to become systems, and then again to become stars and planets. And of the planets, some of which would still possess that same initial spark of creation, and would prove to be capable of creating life. On one particular planet, life advanced in a particular way, a way that would lead to the eventual destruction of that life. This planet was called Earth, and the life at the cause of this destruction were called humans. They would grow and advance, making cities, vehicles, and weapons, until eventually the world as they knew it would begin to come to an end, and the lives as they lived them would become unsustainable. But one man refused. One man fought against this inevitable result of humanity's hubris. One out of all the people, one in a million, one in billions, perhaps even the least likely thing to have saved humanity. But by combining experiments with a faster than light time traveling particle known as the tachyon, and powerful psychedelic drugs, and ancient meditative traditional practices, he unlocked the power to send his soul and mind back in time to bear witness to this creation, this spark. And once he understood it, he learned to affect it, and its effect on creation was able to come closer and closer to the present until finally every particle that made up existence would be under his command. He attempted to send himself back in time over and over again, putting his soul into the body of an ancestor in order to affect or change what he could to bring humanity onto the right path, one that would ensure life on this planet called Earth. But unfortunately, this moving into the bodies of the past was the limit of his effect on the spark of life. It was a different spark, one that happened at a different time, in a different age, in a different way for each individual planet it happened on. And because of this, eventually he had no choice but to give up on gently pushing a humanity destined to destroy itself. There was no way he could save the world, so he became its overlord, only sending himself back in time to ensure that his ancestors would get his present as close as possible to long-distance space travel. By the time he was an elder, he was the ruler of Earth, and it had its own fleet. He called this fleet the Monarchy, after the butterflies, for without the butterfly effect, it would not have even been possible. After being in space for a few decades, the fleet would come across a distress signal from an extraterrestrial fleeing pursuit from an oppressive regime. Once informed of the situation, they were led back to the extraterrestrial's home world, where they quickly dispatched of the tyrannical ruler, thus cementing the monarchy's place in the galaxy as destroyers of dystopia who would build utopias from their ashes. Now that the overlord position of Golden Monarch has reached its 10th holder, we begin in a room, not of the 10th Golden Monarch or some seasoned war veteran, simply the quarters of young monarch Laura Saroon, The room itself was sparsely decorated. The walls, capable of changing into any color or pattern of the owner's choosing, were still in their matte gray. Only an empty dresser and body-length mirror filled the room. There was a closet space opposite the bed, holding within it the standard uniform of a monarch, a tan double-breasted coat, and a black form-fitting one-piece with long orange stripes that go down the sides of the arms, legs, and torso. Opposite the closet, on top of the bed, lay Laura Saroon in a lavender silk nightgown, the only other article of clothing she owns. She had fair skin and blonde hair that went down to the top of her back. Floating in the air, a white robot with a black screen portraying an LED smiling face begins to yelp loudly from the speakers built into its form.
Wake up, Laura, wake up. It is time to wake up. Wake up, Laura, wake up.
Spherical robot explodes as Laura holds up a clenched fist. When she opens her hand, it goes back together, smiling and floating like nothing ever happened.
I love mornings, but I hate waking up. When I'm asleep, my dreams come naturally. But when I'm awake, I have to focus in order to realize my dreams. And then, there's this.
As she waves her hand back towards herself, her uniform shoots from her closet, straight off the hangers, and onto her body that is now splayed out across the bed. Polymers and molecules of the black and orange bodysuit separate as if they are being torn on the molecular level, and covering her body as the purple nightgown does the same to leave it. They move across their arms and legs and torso, shaping across every curve. It fits so perfectly, it's almost as if she made the outfit herself, and for all intents and purposes, she just did. The tan double-breasted coat follows suit, doing the same. The sleeves are an inch shorter in order to showcase the orange stripes near the beginning of the wrist. The bottom of the coat goes past the waist, stopping at the upper thigh. The moment the uniform is together and in one piece, it starts to sizzle and steam as a laser sanitation system begins to enact its work beneath the garments. Complete with a globe over the head and now bundled up hair in order to make sure the face is cleaned properly.
Ugh, it hurts every time. They say it gets better, but it hasn't yet.
Rolls to the right side of her bed beside where a nightstand is positioned. On top of it lay an object that is shaped like a capital T and appears to be made of a golden brass. It appears to be in the loop of a leather belt intended for its storage. A belt of which she grabs, whips onto the bed, and rolls onto, wrapping it around herself before clasping it and falling off the bed, landing on her feet to properly wake herself up for today. She stretches and walks to a mirror, and as she is checking herself to ensure that there are no wrinkles or tears in the uniform, there's a metallic knock on the door.
Orbo, open the door if you don't mind.
The spherical robot winks and obliges as the metal door lifts open, sliding upwards on its tracks to reveal an enforcer. In order to both liberate and maintain order in a civilization, the monarchy empire requires two types of troops: the monarch, known for their powers, and the enforcer, known for their talent in martial arts and weaponry. The weapon issued to the enforcer is known as the shock lance, a rectangular rifle that fires a steady stream of lightning. They utilize a acrobatic fighting style that also includes some grappling. This seems to be enough to take care of most types of enemies, even at the rare times when those enemies were once monarchs themselves. Her uniform is almost identical to the monarch's, except for it includes bracers that go from the wrists to the elbows, and armor around the shins and calves. The enforcer currently at the door has dark skin and piercing gray eyes with messy white hair that goes down to his shoulders. Laura walks through a pair of brown boots on her way to the enforcer that conform to the perfect size. My apologies, miss. I didn't know you weren't ready.
Nonsense. If anything, I'm the one running late. Who knows how long you were waiting out here for? I even made you impatient enough to knock. And what might be your name, Enforcer?
My name is Leon Mannix. I was assigned to your squad, and I'm here to make sure you don't miss any of your scheduled training appointments. Not to mention making sure you got up and at 'em in time for your next mission.
How could I almost forget? I still have that sparring match with Marlene. It was his condition to allow me to train with his enforcers. I've only been out of training for the past 3 months now, and get used practice against enemies with different abilities than my own. Plus, his enforcers are soldiers with years of experience, who have been on various liberations and on planet missions. I look forward to any tips or insight they could offer me. Marlene, on the other hand, is a short-sighted, arrogant fool who only thinks about himself, a poor excuse for a monarch.
As Laura is lost in thought, something that is both common for monarchs and one of the ways they utilize their powers, Aleon rolls his eyes in annoyance.
Thank you for retrieving me, Aleon. Your thoughtfulness is much appreciated.
Malay, your flattery is as unwarranted as it is surprising. Thank you, I guess. Shall we go? As the sliding door of Laura's quarters goes down to close, they begin walking the halls of the Monarchy flagship. Each corridor of the Monarchy flagship has an off-white floor, wall, and ceiling, with an orange line in the middle of the wall that continues down the hallway. Each Monarchy flagship has enough rooms fit to be living quarters to house 10,000 members, as well as 100 latrines, canteens, and training rooms. Each training room can be retrofitted through holographic hard light technology to showcase any number of different combat environments. And as the pair close in on the training room, they spot Marlene, who has one of his enforcers pressed against a wall. Marlene would be traditionally attractive by human standards if not for his blue skin and fuchsia hair. His hair is done in a style that is cut flat at the top and completely shaved on all sides. The enforcer he's admonishing has tan skin and dark hair with a similar haircut, though not as fresh. I don't care how many people you saved, you disobeyed a direct order and almost got your team killed. But sir, most of the danger came from you. And now you're arguing with me, what nerve? Why, I should report this. One word from me and you'll be working with a monarch so wet behind the ears you'll have to change their diapers. Oh, what a coincidence. There's one now.
I suggest you start preparing for our training session, old man. Wouldn't want you using getting a cramp as an excuse for why you lost to a rookie.
I don't. There's a slight pop in his neck as he turns it to the side, so he turns to walk towards the training room, but not before leaving some final words for the enforcer. We will continue this later. Laura walks over to the enforcer and holds out a hand, which he promptly shakes.
Hi, my name's Laura. What might yours be?
Theodore, why do you seem to care? Are you the monarch that's supposed to train with us in a few minutes?
It just so happens I am. I heard you guys were rather experienced. If you don't mind my asking, how many years have you been working as an enforcer of the Monarchy Empire?
A little over 6 years, so around double Marlene's 3.
Wow, you must have learned a lot in that amount of time. I hope you can give me a few tips so that I may also benefit from your wellspring of experience.
You're rather strange, Monarch. Most don't even want our suggestions, and you want tips? Well, we'll do our best. Hope we don't disappoint you. She begins walking towards the training room.
Just don't go too easy on me, okay? I have nothing to learn from a false sense of security.
The sliding metal door opens as Laura walks up to it, and she enters the training room. The training room is composed of an empty white grid. At 100 feet up, there are black rectangles resembling windows. These project a close-up view of whoever is fighting in the training room to people eating 1 floor up, technically, from where Laura is standing in the cantina. Marlene is standing at the center of the room, finishing a few stretches. Laura joins him, a few feet from the center.
Ready whenever you are.
Your funeral? Laura raised an eyebrow at that. I'll keep my sword unstunned, I was only joking.
You don't inspire women with a lot of trust, huh?
They both quietly pull the brass capital T-shaped object from their belts, use their powers to sense a switch concealed inside the handle and flip it to stun. A 9-inch wide, 3-foot long, blue translucent blade extends from the wide top of the object that turns out to be the hilt of the sword used by every monarch in the monarchy empire. The full sword weighing as much as a thin steel longsword of the same blade length, but less than a third the blade width. They stand right side towards their opponent, with their weapon in their right hand pointed straight out, so the points of their swords are a foot from one another.
I tried starting my first training session like this, only to have the enforcer I was sparring with spear tackle me so hard I lost grip on my weapon and the match. I learned the hard way that this starting position is for monarch on monarch training bouts only.
The moment they lock eyes, Laura turns towards her opponent, puts her sword in both hands, and points her blade towards her opponent's throat. Marlene keeps his side facing Laura, continuing to hold his sword in one hand, but bringing it down in line with his waist. I already have the upper hand. I'm taller and faster than you. As he says this, he launches towards her with a thrust towards her upper body. She knocks it to the right with the flat of her blade.
He's right, I have to probe his defenses.
As he circles the sword around for a cut to her left side, she points her blade down while knocking his away, then moves forward to deliver an upward slash. Too slow, he jumps back the moment the sword is swung. It passes harmlessly through the trailing fabric of the coat.
Bad move. I would have parried or sidestepped.
She thinks as she attempts to thrust towards his lower body while he's still in midair. He forces himself into a spin to block her first thrust with the flat of his blade, then flips his sword in his hand, blocking a second thrust before landing. As his back foot touches the ground, Laura swings a cut towards his legs, forcing him to lift his front foot back up before it can reach the ground to avoid it. She turns the miss into another upward slash that he knocks away with a low smack from his sword. When she turns it into a thrust, he quickly circles his sword to knock it to his left. She then quickly passes her blade beneath his to deliver a cut to his waist. So pathetic. He, in order to dodge, reaches up, leaning all the way back, and diving back, tucking into a waist-high backflip, both avoiding the cut and gaining a bit of distance. Laura launches forward towards him just as low, with her right side facing him, her blade pointed down flat in front of her body, seeing the world with a sliver of blue tint as a small sacrifice for defense. When Marlene lands, he immediately delivers a thrust that hits the flat of her blade. It bounces off upwards as sparks fly. She remains low and tries another cut to his leg. He quickly lifts his leg to avoid it. When she misses, she puts the blade above her head and remains low, while he circles his sword to do an upward slash. Her hard, simultaneous downward swing knocks down his blade, and as it bounces against the ground, she moves forward and delivers an upward slash that goes harmlessly through his groin, chest, and left shoulder. As she passes by him and deactivates her sword, he falls to the ground, unconscious.
Interesting. He was using the air and space around himself in order to better evade attacks. I need to start working on that.
2 enforcers pick up the defeated Marlene and carry him outside of the training hall. They sit him down and lean him against the wall, which is protocol for when one of the members of the squad become incapable of training so that the others can continue to do so. Sir Marlene was a little over-reliant on his speed, huh?
Yep, he sure was, but if he was a little less complacent in his training, he might have actually won.
Thought onto that too, huh? Well, you're right. He doesn't train often, and when he does, it's usually against a less experienced monarch like yourself. This is probably in order to keep some secret technique he figured out. When will you monarchs learn that sharing's more efficient than monopolizing?
Oh, I didn't know I'd be stealing from him. I guess I won't learn it then.
No, go right ahead. You were wrong, but you're not the idiot he is. That is kind of the entire point of a spar. You're supposed to learn from each other, as well as weaknesses in your own defense that you can improve on later before you actually get into a real fight.
Instead, some of the coolest techniques never get taught to anybody, unless R&D can recreate them with normal science.
How inefficient. I tell you, it never gets easier protecting you guys from yourselves. So you wanted to train with us. You're only the third monarch to actually ask to do that. For any squad I've been in, at least. Marlene was surprised and offended that you didn't want to train with him at first. Like he was just a bonus. He found it quite strange.
Well, I don't usually learn that much from monarchs. They're either quite good at hiding their secrets, or
beat them handedly in a sword fight in spite of them. How often do you train with enforcers, if you don't mind my asking?
well, I try to go to a different cantina every night in order to speak with a different group, so I'd say I've been doing this about every morning for the past 3 months, after when I was instated as a monarch of the Empire. I've never won once, though. Sometimes I manage to defeat 1 or 2 of them, but nothing consistent.
Enforcers behind Piotr, one a woman with red hair, pink skin, and freckles, the other a man with dark skin and blonde hair, looked towards each other with confusion. You heard her. She said it. She's living proof. We're theoretically trained to take on blues. Winning a fight against her is gonna be possible. It's just gonna be really difficult. Especially since she's had experience fighting us already. So, you two should be on your toes. A blue monarch is a monarch that has been corrupted by the power they wield. This is caused by overuse, usually in the name of selfish or vain ends. Marked by dark circles around the eyes first that glow with dark light. This is reversible. However, once that darkness streams down the face into 2 lines on either side of the nose, this is no longer reversible, and causes the monarch to act selfishly, hungry to experience the feeling of the power they controlled in that moment. They both nod at Piotr's reassurance that they were trained to defeat a blue monarch with the urgency of someone being told what they were having for lunch.
Please keep shock lances to a minimum if you don't mind. I'm going on a patrol with my first squad, and I want to learn as much as I can beforehand.
Just finished squad trailing? Who did they put you with?
Polonia's squad.
Wow, that's a high honor. She captains her own ship. That's the closest thing to a high-ranking officer in the Monarchy Empire.
I know, right? To get a double-decade legend as my field trainer? I was so excited, but I'm even more excited to finally head up my own squad.
Well, congratulations. Alright, squad, you heard her. Let's try and keep shock lances to a minimum. Well, since you've already told us about yourself, it's only fair that I keep things even. This young lady is Sars. She's been an enforcer for 2 years. This man is Calum. He's been an enforcer for 1.5. Other than Aranya, I could probably count on one hand the amount of monarchs that actually train with enforcers. I myself have only fought one of you guys 6 times. 3 of them have only been in training, and 3 of them have been an actual encounter with a blue. This means you're actually the most experienced fighter in the room right now, regardless of how many times you've won, lost, or tied. Team, focus up. This is gonna be tough.
Now, wait a minute. No need to lock in on my account. I've actually never won.
Piotr pays close attention to her body, the way it moves with every gesture, but ultimately ignores her words. Alright team, remember your formations. Know that numbers are our main advantage, and remember that all monarchs have one thing in common. In bouts like these, one rule is important to remember above all else. If any of their abilities score a direct hit on you, you're out. They're holding back on purpose so we don't die.
Trust, there's no need for any fancy formations.
Be extra careful. As you can tell, this one's not going to underestimate us like all the others usually do. Then, with a nod, they press a fingerprint on their collar, causing the pressurized bubble helmets to activate on their suits, while also allowing soldiers the ability to breathe in space due to their air reproduction capabilities. They also offer more than adequate head protection. Then the helmets do something that Laura had never seen done before in any of her previous training bouts. They take on a foggy white tent, completely obscuring the faces and identities of the Enforcer squad.
Well, I guess that throws out the take out the newer members first part of the plan.
Laura pulls the brass hilt of her sword from her belt, activating it and setting it to stun. As the blue blade extends, her right hand moves up to the top of the handle, while the bottom of the handle is pressed against her left wrist. Her left hand is held open, with its palm facing her opponent's. Her hands are then placed in front of her waist, ensuring that the blade of the sword guards the top half of her body.
Okay, lock in, Laura. Let's try and take out at least 2 of them. That way we don't get any worse than our personal best.
2 of the enforcers lock arms, switching themselves around in a circle. The second rotation, the third jumps towards the orbiting pair, stepping lightly onto their interlocked arms, just long enough to be propelled even further into the air.
I don't even want to know what this trick feels like.
Laura lifts up her hand, pulling a 6-foot by 6-foot cube of concrete from the floor that immediately heals itself, and sends it towards the pair of enforcers on the ground. The third one in the air pulls a silver square from a secret compartment in the back of his jacket. Smacks it onto his back. He pulls a dark gray metallic gun handle encased in a thick rectangular handle guard from his back. Once the silver square hits his back, the nanotechnology inside of it is expelled, causing a silvery metal to take form on his back and silver straps to form an X across his shoulders and chest. As the dark gray metal rectangle is carried over his shoulder, it extends into a gray metallic rifle, 6 inches wide, 2 inches thick, and 2 feet long. Once it is placed into his right hand, held in both the left and the right, it has become the shock lance, the signature weapon of the enforcers in the Monarchy Empire. The 2 enforcers on the ground let go of each other, being flung away from one another fast enough to easily avoid the concrete block as they moved along the edge of the wall in an attempt to flank Laura on either side. Laura moves her left hand from side to side as she splits the concrete block in half in order to follow them. She turns the concrete into tendrils that tail the enforcers, having to look back and forth between the both of them, and use her pinky and forefinger on her left hand to direct the tendrils.
Multitasking's a really bad idea, but I don't think I have much choice.
She opens her left hand and lifts it up, pointing her open palm to the enforcer in the air as the ground 30 feet in front of her explodes when she rips the silicon from it, mixing it with the breathable air to form a wall of air gel, blocking the lightning bolt that courses from the shock lance in the airborne enforcer's hands. While the lightning harmlessly strikes the effective makeshift insulator, she puts down her left hand, continuing to track the 2 fleeing enforcers. The one on the left slides then flips, while the one on the right flips then slides. A simple maneuver, one going high and the other going low, but it's a headache for Laura. The one on the left dives into a roll, landing in a low lunge, before turning and delivering a palm strike to their stream of concrete. It shatters and cracks down in a line, breaking the whole thing into smithereens with a single hit. Laura points the sword in her right hand towards the enforcer on her left, instructing the pieces like a conductor in an orchestra, causing them to split up and circle around the enforcer, surrounding them before converging on a single point. She uses her left hand to track the enforcer on her right. As the pieces converge, the enforcer in the middle windmills their arms. The metallic bracers covering their forearms easily shatter the small stones into dust, not even worth manipulating, without turning into a different element entirely. The enforcer flies from the dust cloud, silver pack on their back and ionic thruster blaring, right before Laura takes apart the dust on the molecular level, causing an explosion. The enforcer outflies with some difficulty. At the same time, the enforcer above her shatters the air gel barrier. She jumps up and back 15 feet, avoiding the Superman punch from the flying enforcer, empowered by the shockwave of the explosion she created behind them. As they pass in front of her, she speeds up the air and vibrates it, causing a sonic shockwave in a 15-foot cone. As it hits the enforcer, they are knocked to the ground, bouncing away before sliding a few feet to a stop. Unfortunately, they were the distraction the airborne enforcer needed, leaving Laura no choice but to lift the flat of her blade in front of her body before bracing it with her left hand. As a lightning bolt hits it, shot from the shock lance, it strikes the blade, and the charges disperse in a vertical radius before creating a spider web of glowing cracks in the air. Laura is knocked back by the powerful electrostatic forces repelling themselves. The wind is knocked from her lungs as her back hits the wall. She's barely able to make an air cushion for the back of her head in order to remain conscious. While 15 foot up against the wall, she erects a gravity field in order to roll to the right as a drop kick from an incoming enforcer shatters the space where her torso would have been. She causes her blade to fly from her right hand into her left. As she swings for their legs, they jump over it, but not high enough to leave the gravity field, landing on their knees. She swings again, this time for their upper thigh, but they lay all the way back and grab her by the wrist of their left hand. She tries flying the sword back to her right hand, only to be yanked beneath it and pulled into a hug with the enforcer, who jumps out of the gravity field, causing them to fall straight down instead of sideways, forcing them into a spin. Laura looks up to try and track the ground beneath them, and with some focus, she creates what she calls a matter gradient, turning the solid earth into a trampoline. When the enforcer lets go, slamming her head into the ground gives way, bending away with the impact, before snapping back into place, bouncing them in separate directions. Laura calls her sword back into her right hand before delivering a slash across the enforcer's waist, causing him to go unconscious. Laura lands on the solid ground with her sword in both hands, being held in front of her waist.
Alright, I know there were 3 of them. Where?
Is all she has time to think before arms reach around her from behind, pinning her forearms against her waist and lifting her up into a suplex. She desperately tries to circle her blade downward to the side of her body in order to hit the person behind her, but her back and head hit the ground first.
I yield.
She turns off her sword before the enforcer lets go of her before twisting to stand straight up and holding out a hand to help her stand as well. You lost track of me there.
I knew that was gonna be you. Where'd you go? How'd you do that?
I just stayed in your blind spot when you came down. I'll admit pinning the arms was a little bit of a gamble, but with enough practice, you'll probably be able to counter that.
Yeah, if I could have just moved my blade a little faster, I could have stunned you beneath me.
Yeah, I guess it does kind of suck that you monarchs can't use your powers that close to your bodies, and risk of tearing your suits.
No, it only sucks until you consider the fact that we're trained to fight ships in space. One mistake and we depressurize the helmets, leaving us to die in a vacuum.
Your swordsmanship is great, which is why I recommend it never leave your hand during a fight if you can help it. You might want to keep us from splitting up next time, and if that fails, focus on taking one of us out as soon as possible. You never want to multitask during a fight. When we're on the battlefield, we delegate tasks. One of us is guarding the monarch, one of us is fighting the enemies, and one of us is keeping track of anything the other 2 miss. There's already a bunch of things in a chaotic fight that you need to keep track of. Genuinely splitting your focus 3 ways can't be a good idea. Also, switch tactics faster. If something's not working, switch to something else. You monarchs have a wellspring of options most enemies simply don't have.
Noted. It just feels so hard sometimes, bridging that gap. Like, I know that eventually I'll be as strong as everyone I see above me, but they're not helping me get there. I know it's good to have heroes and role models, but sometimes it just seems so unapproachable. Like, I want to be independent, like Ulysses the Vanguard, able to win entire liberations on his own, if he went against protocol, that is. Or get my own ship, like Aranya. I don't know, it just all seems so far away. Do you guys have any enforcers you look up to?
Not really. We don't really make that big of a splash. Plus, we genuinely don't have ranks. Even things like captain of a ship are out of our reach. But, there was one. His name was Chase Lindell. He worked with the Empire for about 10 years before we lost him in a big fight. Lost a lot of good enforcers that day. The guy just up and disappeared, though. As soon as they found out he was alive, they put out some wanted posters for him. But other than that, we haven't heard that much.
What could an enforcer do in 10 years worth looking up to?
He did more work in 10 years than most squads do in 40. He would figure out a way to gain more merits every day. Normally when you're out on patrol, you keep a lookout for trouble, but Chase actively looked for it, and he'd find it. He was good at finding trouble. And when he found a problem, he'd solve it with the help of his squad, and he'd keep solving problems, so the Monarchs would keep getting the merits, and eventually, he would be rewarded by getting put with more experienced members of the Empire. And after 10 years of doing this, he eventually got put in the same squad as your illustrious Vanguard. And then, that liberation mission happened. We lost a lot of good enforcers that day. I wonder what horrible plan Chase came up with for that to happen. And then just to leave like that. But yeah, stellar record before that. Those of us with the gumption try to strive for that same accomplishment quantity that he had, but few succeed. It's hard to try and accomplish something new every day, plus you Monarchs usually get in the way. Given that you're the de facto squad leaders, we can only go where you want to go, and if you don't want to go somewhere that could possibly grant great merit to the squad, then we don't go there. Because our wise leader has his head stuck too far up his butt. No offense.
None taken. Thanks for training with me. Yeah, I always wondered if you guys looked up to anybody. I just never thought to ask.
Enforcers pick up their unconscious comrade and leave the training hall, as Laura follows behind them. The door opens automatically as they approach and the four of them walk out. Marlene, now awake, does not meet Laura's gaze, but simply joins his enforcers as they head down the hallway. Leon rejoins Laura's side. How'd it go? Did you win?
I won against Marlene, but I lost against the other enforcers.
Well, I think a lot of Monarchs need to lose a little more often. Helps them know what they need to work on. Surely by now you found the value in it. So, shall we go meet the rest of the team?